Welcome back, everybody, to Tubby Talk. I am Terry from Terry Leahy Films, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts,
Chris,
Steve,
and they are from the Tubby Robot Ice Cream Factory, where they sell you ice cream. And they also talk about video games, as you can see from these beautiful murals behind us. You've been watching the show for a while. Sorry that I haven't been keeping up with the edits, but we're working on it to get more content for you. Today, we decided to ask Steve what he wanted to talk about, and he came up with a great idea, being 16-bit fighters.
I did?
You did. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this topic was important to you?
No, so the topic was important to me because I was put on the spot, and Terry's like, what topic do you want to talk about? No. It was important to me because I spent a lot of time in my life playing fighting games. I would probably say a third of my video gaming over a lifetime has been fighting gaming.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It was a lot. Like, I didn't have up-to-date consoles in like high school, so I spent a lot of time at the arcade. And I mostly spent time at the arcade playing the Marvel's vs. games. I would play Tekken, Tekken 2 mostly. I would play Soul Calibur and Soul Edge, which I loved. None of those are 16-bit though, not really. They might have been ported to 16-bit, but just fighting games were like something I loved. I was never very good at them, but I enjoyed them. And so a topic that we hadn't really broached in depth yet was 16-bit fighting games. I had a few in mind when I came up with the topic, and then I did a little bit of research and found a couple more that I barely remembered, but then it brought back memories of playing the arcade version and some playing the 16-bit version, which had just slipped out of my memory. But yeah, so it's something that felt like it's something I could speak about at not length, but with interest, and I'd be more accurate than I have been with some of my remembrances about video games.
And where do you fall on the 16-bit fighter spectrum?
I really love 16-bit fighters. I mean, I probably, like with most things, I like them better than 3D fighters, like 32-bit things. Like, I like those too, like those are fine, but, you know, Street Fighter, I think it was special for everyone back then. Anyone in an arcade. I mean, Street Fighter was the arcade in the 90s. Yeah. It was. Like, it brought you in, and then other stuff knocked it off and brought it in new directions. But the reason you were in an arcade, the reason a lot of people bought a Super Nintendo was Street Fighter.
True.
Yeah, Championship Edition.
The first Street Fighter game I ever played was at my cousin John's house. He had a birthday party, and he had just gotten a Super Nintendo, and the only game he got was a copy of Street Fighter 2. And plugged that in, and he had a bunch of friends over. It was a big sleepover with, like, you know, 12 stinky kids, and we just piled in and just played Street Fighter all night. And the whole time I was like, but what about Mario World? Where's Mario World? But Street Fighter was very exciting. So.
You know what was interesting about Street Fighter, though? It wasn't just in the arcade. That game was in the pizza shop. That game was in a convenience store.
Yeah, or the bodega, or the gas station.
Yeah. And there was that warm-up, and there's the punch, and then it starts.
Yeah,
rolls up the building.
And at that point, the beginning of Street Fighter 2 has these two characters who are not in the game.
Right.
Yeah, at all. They finally named them like last year. It's like some supplemental stuff for Street Fighter 5. Capcom has like a website where they have like data files on all sorts of like Final Fight and Street Fighter like background characters, because they're all within the same universe. So I forget their names, and it was like Chuck and Dan.
Very generic.
Very generic names, but they were just like guys that would just happen to be around in Street Fighter. And then they have complicated backstories that weave throughout some of the games. They don't show up in any of them.
They were totally made up after the fact.
Yeah, they were retconned into the series.
Because in the beginning, like, that's like, it's almost shown like a news serial where it's like, this is the first time two men thought to fight in the street. And now that they fought in the street and innovated, now we have this new breed.
That goes across the world for some reason.
Yeah, it never made a lot of sense to me when I thought about the logistics of it, because I was like, oh, well, people beat up each other until one's knocked out, and then they fight. It can't be the same day. Your energy's not coming back. You have to heal up all your cuts and wounds. So, like, how long are these matches taking?
As long as an airplane flight. That's why they show you between the matches. It flies to the next location.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, Street Fighter's a good one. This one will be interesting for me because I'm not 100% sure if I like 32-bit fighters more, and you guys will have to correct me when we start talking about that.
Does that count like the PlayStation era?
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm leaning, because I had some special memories with that. But let's talk about the first one. Well, we just did. We talked about Street Fighter, but the other one that is 16-bit but doesn't look 16-bit is Mortal Kombat, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That does not look like a 16-bit game. Like, they did actual camera footage of like people fighting, and they put it in the game. I don't know, what is that defined as?
So it was digitized sprites, and then they shrunk the sprites down for the home versions, but they were still detailed enough that they held on to like some of their fidelity. Much more than some games which were ported to the 16-bit systems, which I'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, they took photos of people in costume and had them pose, and those were the sprites. Every frame of animation, and I believe they still have like photos from the shoots where they actually had those actors, which is pretty cool to go back and see.
One of the things about Mortal Kombat on 16-bit was they were all digitized sprites. They were shrunk down. There were also, I think every iteration of Mortal Kombat up to 3 Ultimate is on Sega Genesis.
Well, Trilogy is I guess Trilogy's 64-bit, right? Because that was on N64.
Well, yeah, but
The Trilogy was like a different. I think Trilogy and Ultimate are like 2 versions, 2 sides of the same coin as far as games go.
I would consider them all 16-bit. Like they're all of that ilk. It's all the same engine. I remember actually Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is the first Mortal Kombat game. I think the only one I ever owned, and I got it because some kid at school wanted me to write a paper for him, and he's like, "If you write this paper for me, I'll give you Mortal Kombat Ultimate." And back then, I didn't even care what the game was. It was just like a cartridge.
Fun thing, yeah, new game.
I was like, "Oh, a new cartridge! Oh my God, yes, I will write that paper for you." And I wrote it, and I got the game, and I still have it to this day. And yeah, I liked characters who ended up being, once they found out later, they're terrible apparently. I like Stryker. Apparently, Stryker
for some reason I like playing because he had electricity baton.
And he had a fun running move that nobody else
The
had.
dash through. He had to dash through and throw them. Like that was really fun.
The noise he made was atrocious though.
Yeah.
Especially on the 16-bit, he's just like.
Though to be fair, he did make it to the animated series on USA, as well as Cabal.
I never saw that one.
I remember
You didn't see it?
Yeah,
No.
I didn't have
Maybe
cable
2
when this on.
episodes, but
Yeah, I never saw the anime series. I saw the live-action Mortal Kombat series,
which I heard was good.
Yeah, they used to come on Channel 57 at night, which is now the CW. But it was starring Christiana Loken, who was the Terminator in Terminator 3.
Yeah, she got more famous later.
Yeah, but she was just like a random woman that lived in a small town where Mortal Kombat happened. It was supposed to be medieval, I believe. It was very time. But anyway. And then the guy that played Scorpion was in a lot of kung fu movies in the 80s and 90s. And he's not like name famous. You wouldn't know him by name, but you'll know him by seeing him in movies. Like I recognize him just mentally from like lots of things. But he also played Sub-Zero in that one. So Scorpion, he just had like the face mask and he removed it for Sub-Zero.
Yeah, same guy.
You know, Mortal Kombat's one of the first games. Well, Mortal Kombat did a lot. One, it brought us blood for the first time. It got brutal.
Started the violence in video game debate in earnest.
And the ESRB ratings were
Yeah, the
brought about
ESRB
partially because
was
of it.
created almost entirely because of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I also remember like character stories probably came from that game more so than Street Fighter. Street Fighter, of course, adapted it later when you get into like Ryu and Akuma and how all that works. But
Like the interstitials, like when you're fighting a certain character and they have like a little dialogue. Yeah.
yeah, and there's like a backstory. Hidden characters, like the whole reptile thing blew your mind. Smoke in the woods.
Secrets were incredible back then because there was no internet. You didn't look up this stuff. It was all word of mouth. And there were so many secrets loaded in that game that it kept the lore going. So there were a lot of characters who were rumors that they then made into real characters in later iterations to make the rumors true.
Like who?
Like Noob Saibot.
Noob Saibot. He was originally a rumor, and then they were like, well, let's put him in. Let's just make him. Yeah.
And it's Tobias Boone backwards, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I know it kept me playing Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 in the arcade. Every time I heard about a new secret, I was like, okay, now I gotta go and test this out. And half the time it wouldn't work. And people were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I learned this new thing. And then when it didn't work, I'm like, I don't want to show it to you. I'm keeping it a secret. You're not ready for this
You're not ready to
secret.
find out about Ermac.
Yeah.
I forgot about
Ermac was another one who was, I think, started as a rumor.
I believe
Ermac
he started as an error.
Yeah, Ermac was one of the cyborgs that his sprite didn't load, so it was just like the Black Shadow.
Okay.
And
I
then
think
they
it was
just
like
made to
error
Black Shadow.
macro or something
Yeah.
was what it stood for. It's just awesome. Rain, the purple one. I mean, pretty much all the ninjas that weren't the original two were a glitch.
And even those two were clones, graphically speaking, of each other.
Speaking of glitches, when you were in 16-bit days, did you have like certain characters, certain moves you could pull off because you were breaking the game to do it?
I don't think so. I normally was a very by the book player. I might have made some very cheesy combos with Ryu that don't necessarily go together, but I was just insistent on getting this combo down. So I don't think I'd bet games so much as I'd like nudge my opponent so they would miss a block. Sometimes, not very often, but every now and then.
I remember doing some spamming in Street Fighter with Dalsim and Bison.
That's what I was gonna say.
With the slide, just keep sliding, and if you did not know how to block low, you just kept
If
getting hit.
you didn't block low in time,
Yeah.
or if you timed it, I think with the home versions of that, if you timed it right, you could hit the slide, so it always knocked it. Because the character would have a frame where they stand up and they're invincible, and then they're not invincible anymore. But the slide was so long that you could time it so that it would last throughout the invincibility frames.
Yeah.
So if it was like one frame they're invincible, the slide's like 4 frames. So you time it right, you always hit them after they're invincible.
And this is something that probably won't exist again that way because they patch games now.
Yeah, that's true.
Although I hear in the Street Fighter collection that's coming out this summer, they're not patching, at least of the final versions they made, they're not patching like the bugs in the final versions.
Well, that makes sense. You don't want to mess with the classics.
Yeah, so it's like archiving those bugs for perpetuity, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember any of the fighters where you were not a human?
Yes. So there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the tournament fighters.
Oh, I remember that.
Which was also on in 8-bit on the NES.
Yeah, that was nice.
With a different
Surprisingly.
character.
Yeah, the cast was a lot different because they couldn't handle everything, but it was a fighting game on the NES, and it blew my mind as a kid. That wasn't Kung Fu, I forget what it was called, Kung Fu Champ? Was that what it was called? That was the Proto Street Fighter, which was gross.
Urban Champion.
Urban Champion.
Horrible. Don't play Urban Champion.
But yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Tournament Fighter was awesome. You got to play as like the Gator, whose name I forget.
Leatherhead.
Yeah. Who I usually chose Leatherhead or Leonardo because I was boring.
I like who's the alien? Oh, my, okay.
I remember that there's an alien. I don't remember his name.
This is a
Krang?
weird way I'm going to get to it is Peter Jackson's production company is called Wingnut Productions, and his name is Wingnut. That's who it is. That's how I had to
I
get
didn't
there.
realize he was an alien. I knew he was a bat. He was Wingnut, and Screwloose was his it was a mosquito partner.
Mm-hmm. But they came from a different dimension through like a giant rabbit head, through a giant something.
Were they from so they went from Dimension X? They're from a separate dimension?
I think so. I'll have to look it up. There's some sort of time travel, dimensional hopping creature that's a giant something that they used to go through.
Oh, wow.
But no, I don't think he was a mutanimal, but feel free to let me know if I'm wrong and he was a
No,
mutanimal.
you sound right. And I remember his moveset specifically. I love anyone who has like a diagonal diving kick.
Mm-hmm.
Like Akuma.
Like Akuma, zip kick. Yep, love Akuma for that reason.
Kuma also has a downward fireball, which that's insane.
Yeah, I love chaining them together. Fire, fire, kick. Oh,
Yep.
It's good.
You can't stop him. You can't stop him.
There's another game that I know Terry wants to bring up where you play as non-humans. Mm-hmm. It's a very Cretaceous game.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Primal Rage, which I wasn't sure if was 16-bit or not, but I remember playing it on Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
but I didn't know if
16-bit.
it's like Super FX chip means that you don't get to.
Well, it was on Genesis.
Yeah.
But apparently the Genesis version had the smallest sprites out of all the home versions, and therefore it's harder to play. Mm-hmm. And apparently the game was just very ill-received critically in general. So they were like, at least it looks cool because you're playing as like it's post-apocalyptic first of all, which I thought it was in the past.
Yeah,
Apparently it's in the far future.
Oh.
You fight as different animal gods to the
They're
surviving
gods?
to the surviving human race.
Oh yeah, I do remember the little guys running on the bottom.
Yeah, so like there was a big like gray, silver, white like gorilla who was the god of good. His name was Blizzard.
Blizzard.
He had ice. He had like an ice fart or something.
Yeah.
That he attacked you with, but he was like the main character. He was a good guy. There was Sauron, who was a pterodactyl, I believe, kind of like the Marvel Sauron. Like he's basically the same character, and he was like one of the gods of evil. Was it a giraffe? It wasn't a giraffe. Oh,
No, but it could like snap
a
at you.
Apatosaurus or something.
Yeah, a Pandasaurus or a Brontosaurus if you.
I thought Brontosaurus was one.
I think it shot
Hey,
like
one but now they're
green.
back. It's a whole thing.
I think it was a green fireball thing. But
was
what I do remember about it, it did not have a quarter circle forward Y button attack, and it
wow.
drove me insane. How could that not be how you spit fire? Instead, it was something very difficult, and I couldn't pull it off. It was also one of those moves where you had to like hold back for 5 seconds, forward for 2, and then hit.
Charge moves are no fun.
No, they're not. Do you remember the game?
Primal Rage, yes. I remember. I never actually played it much, but I remember like it struck me as different because it was not just non-human, but non-humanoid characters. Like a Tyrannosaurus Rex has a very different profile than like a Triceratops, and it's like, how is this going to work? And apparently, it didn't work super great.
It didn't work at all.
But it was also kind of a gory game.
Yeah, it's very
at
gory.
least the original arcade iterations of
Yeah,
it
the
were.
arcade version and the Jaguar version. I mostly remember it being a Jaguar like exclusive at first, and then Jaguar failed and it came out for everything.
Were there fatalities in that?
Yes.
And I think that game was also they used maquettes to make. It was actually photographed 3D models, I think, of the creatures because it certainly wasn't a photograph of a Tyrannosaurus.
Yes. And it wasn't a guy in like a Triceratops costume on all fours trying to.
No, I think it was they used maquettes, kind of like they used in Doom, the original Doom. They made 3D maquettes of each of the enemies. Yeah, it looked neat, and I love dinosaurs, but I was also kind of like, it's one of them gross games. Like, I'm not going to get into that.
I'm pretty sure one of the fatality for the gorilla is like he sits on the enemy's face and farts in their mouth and it freezes their head and shatters. It was something very gross and like juvenile.
Speaking of gross and juvenile, there's another non-humanoid, kind of humanoid game that came out that I was obsessed with, and that's Clay Fighter.
I love Clay Fighter.
Clay Fighter was so much fun. I think the second one is better, especially because the box art is a take on T2
Clay
Judgment
Fighter
Day.
2, Judgment Clay.
Yeah. But even like Bad Mr. Frosty's there with glasses and like looking badass.
It's the best name for a character for Bad Mr. Frosty.
But the best part of that game is they took in the classic whoop-dee thing from Mortal Kombat 2 and amped it up to 1,000.
Made it the entire gameplay loop.
Everyone is talking that way. There are claytalities. There are unbelievable sorts of moves and things. You could play as just a blob, like a green blob named Blob.
Character in the whole thing. Was it Blob and Taffy?
Yeah, Earthworm Jim was in one of them. Was he not until the N64 version?
Not till later.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the third game.
But I think there was another crossover character, Boogerman.
Boogerman made it to the
was-
64 one as well.
Oh, so he wasn't in the earlier versions either.
Yeah, the earlier ones was Hoppy something who had a voice. He was supposed to be like a Schwarzenegger action star.
T-Hoppy.
T-Hoppy.
I assume that was Terminator Hoppy. It's not that clever.
But I'm pretty sure they got the guy who would go on to do voices for like Cow and Chicken and Tiny Toons, Charlie Adler, I think did a lot of those voices for that game, which is awesome. And again, that was my favorite part because they all had weird things, but whatever they hit you with, they announced what they were hitting you with, and it just made it fun. I mean, I must have rented that thing that was one of those games I rented so much, my parents must have hated me for not just buying it.
Probably spent $80 renting
Oh
the
yeah.
game. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, another game with non-humans in it was a fighting game called Ballz. Yeah, I believe it was in Super Nintendo only.
Yeah,
I think it was.
I think it was Super Nintendo. It might
Mode
have been, I
7.
think it was Genesis as well. It wasn't Mode 7.
Was it Mode 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was basically vector voxel sort of art, but it was very low. All the characters are made of a series of balls. Literally a series of balls.
Like Vector Man style?
Yes,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Vector Man style.
But not as high fidelity or quality
like
or
each character
animations.
might have been 20 balls.
Still, yeah.
And it was not great. It ran at a terrible frame rate. And it tried to make stupid humor. There weren't voices per se, but they would just put in the same font, like, here is a catchphrase, like every time something would happen. It wasn't good. Clay Fighter was way better. Clay Fighter had like style and artistry and blue suede goo, all that stuff.
There was a hand, right? Wasn't there just a hand that fought?
Later on.
Yeah, I think that.
Oh, was he like the one who? God, I can remember the story.
Yeah, I think he's
of
supposed to be
this
like
game.
one who created them
Yeah,
or
there was
something,
somebody
crafted
created,
them.
and you have to fight the clay creator. They didn't ignore the fact that they were made of clay.
Yeah, they dove into it, and all of the sprites were again photographed actual clay models.
Yeah.
Which was neat. I love the Blob because he turned into just different stuff. Every move he would be a different shape. It was great. And mapped directly to Street Fighter. Like if you could play Street Fighter, you could play Clay Fighter. It was the same.
Was Clay Fighter was it stop motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It's an impressive game. You know, you're not going to enjoy it as much today.
I mean,
but
you should enjoy it as much today.
it had a difficult jump to Clay Fighter 63 and a third when we were doing the whole 64, and it wasn't the same. It was much slower. But to be fair, every 2D game fell victim to, let's get on a 3D world where you can sidestep. It just wasn't the same.
Just walk around in circles, walk around in. I can't sing anymore because of music rights.
But yeah, that sort of Tekken thing happened, right?
Yeah.
Tekken was all about you can move up and down, you just press up and down, and then hey, let's all sidestep.
Was it Tekken or Virtua Fighter that came first?
Virtua Fighter.
Virtua Fighter was first. I think Virtua Fighter, it was definitely on the 32X. I'm trying to remember if it ever was ported to Genesis. I could see them trying to later in the lifespan.
It was definitely 32X, but which is still a Genesis
with
a
other consoles
attachment
shoved in the top of it.
Yeah.
Would you guys consider any of the wrestling games to be 16-bit fighters?
Saturday Night Slam Masters, definitely.
And that one had great pixel art too. Like that was Capcom, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Was that the one where
that was
they
also
had
within the
weapons?
Street Fighter world. Yeah,
Oh, it had Mike Hagar.
yeah. Hagar was he was the wrestling mayor.
We gotta talk about him. So
Yeah, he's one of the best characters. One of the best characters in all the video games. Mayor Mike Hagar.
You're always shirtless. He had one of those suspenders that goes across the chest.
this one.
Well, the best thing is, so in the first game he's in is Final Fight, which was not a fighting game. It was a side-scrolling beat 'em up. It was PvE as opposed to PvP. But the intro story was Jessica, who is Mike Hagar's daughter, has been kidnapped.
And also, is it Cody's girlfriend?
Yes,
Yep.
his girlfriend, and the Mad Gear Gang calls up the mayor, and he's wearing like a suit, and they're like, "Hey, we've kidnapped your daughter Jessica," and it's a video phone because in the '90s everything's a video phone.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What?" And he rips his shirt off, so he's
Just his shirt, not his suspender.
not his suspender, and then he just jumps into the street and starts beating up everyone he sees.
Spinning lariats and he grabbed a pipe and he smashed the pipe. He was spinning pile drivers.
No, he murdered his entire city. Is what he did. But
so
did he ever make it to a fighting game? Because someone else from Final Fight made it.
So he was at Saturday Night Slam Masters, which had very Street Fighter-like controls, but you moved around a very short, but like a ring in like kind of 3D. So it kind of had side steps insofar as you could move up and down or left or right within the ring. But the moves were pulled off with Street Fighter style moves. So quarter circles and charge moves and such.
Later on, he was in a full-on Street Fighter game with Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He
Oh.
was in that, and he's awesome in that.
Yeah, Marvel Capcom 3.
Really
yeah.
good.
I didn't know he made it there.
And then he's not in 4. I think he was rumored as DLC for 4, but then 4 kind of sucked.
You know what paved the way for Marvel vs. Capcom, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, was when after Street Fighter 2, they went Street Fighter Alpha 2, or they went Street Fighter Alpha,
Which also came out
where the
on
charge moves
SNES.
came in. And I remember having Street Fighter Alpha 2 for Super Nintendo, and there are still games or moves from that game that I have looked up and tried to find that I know I did in real life that I have not seen. Like Ryu went gold, and there was a timer on top of his head, and I've looked it up a million times. I cannot figure out what it is, but it happened.
Are you
I
sure this
watched
is Street
it happen.
Fighter Alpha 2 and not Street Fighter Alpha? Some kind of like bootleg from
100%.
China?
I played it on the Super Nintendo. Like I owned it.
Mandela effect.
Maybe. I remember. And I was fighting the old man, whoever that was.
The old,
You had to fight Shenlong to stand a chance. No, Gen. It was the old man.
Again, that's who it was.
Yeah.
Who I later found out was evil. There was a game where suddenly they had evil eyes, and I was like, I thought Dalcium was a good guy the whole time.
Well,
No, Dalcium's always a good guy.
No, he's not. He has the white eyes.
He's a good guy in 4 and 5.
That's just because he's so mystical.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it meant you're bad if you have the white eyes.
Not necessarily, not for him.
It normally means you have unleashed your full potential, which normally is evil power. Because that's what Ryu and Akuma were dealing with. Ryu more than Akuma. Akuma was reveling in it. But Ryu's whole thing was you fighting the Dark Hadu,
Pupils are for the weak.
which you only know about because of the stupid anime movies they made. Stupid, I mean awesome.
I was
They're
gonna say,
Watch
I liked them a lot.
And then there was actually just for Free Comic Book Day, there was a comic book about evil Ryu versus Violent Ken.
Ooh, Violent Ken.
They just made him up.
Yeah. They retconned Violent Ken into like the Street Fighter 2 story. So he's the evil version of Ken when his evil Hadu power takes over.
All I care about is an evil Dan.
You mean
do
Dan?
anything. Yeah, who can't do anything. Did you guys know about Akuma in Street Fighter 2 Turbo?
In the home version, yeah.
I had no idea. This blew my mind about, I don't know, a couple years ago.
Well, I
didn't know he was there.
Yeah, I used to constantly read Electronic Gaming Monthly. I may have spoken about it before in the podcast. And so there was a time where there was, between that and GamePro, there were lots of hoaxes on how you could unlock characters in Street Fighter, starting with Shenlong, their mentor, and Akuma's like friend or something, which was a very, very bad taste April Fool's joke by GamePro, where they told you had to beat the entire game without losing a round, and then you had to do something, and Akuma would come out and murder Bison, and you had to beat Akuma without dying, and then Shenlong would come out and murder Akuma, and they even doctored up a sprite and did a fake screenshot.
Oh my God.
And then it ended
Those
up
monsters.
And they ended up bringing it to fruition later by having their actual master. I forget his name exactly, but it's not Shenlong. But he's in Street Fighter 4.
And that whole thing was another instance of a rumor becoming a real character, because it all came from, there was who was it? When I think Sagat beat you, he was like, to stand a chance, you must defeat Shenlong. And
That was one of Ryu's quotes.
One of Ryu's quotes. And it was like, who is that? Like, that's not mentioned in the game at all. And it was a mistranslation. It was supposed to be something completely different.
Yeah.
And then Capcom was like, well, no, Shenlong's, he's an old master. He exists now, sure. So they put him in later. He's in Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, his name's Guken. And Akuma's real name is like, it's very close to Guken. I think they're brothers. So it's Guken and
That's where the
Goken.
beads came from.
Yeah.
Like he took his beads or something like that. But that was in Street Fighter 4, which is way beyond where we are.
But so Akuma in Street Fighter 2 Turbo, he was in the arcade. I forget how you unlocked him, but I think it was by basically beating the game without losing a round, and you have to like dominate Bison, and he comes out and finishes him and kills him. And you
It
finish
really
him
was
off.
that intricate that you had to do.
Like it wasn't as intricate as the April Fool's gag, but it was like you just had to like have perfects throughout the entire game.
There was one game that you just had to press up, and then you would get.
I know what game it is.
Oh, which one was that? I couldn't remember.
There was X-Men versus Street Fighter.
Okay.
Or Marvel vs. Street Fighter, one of those. One of the early versus games.
It was also in Street Fighter the movie, the game.
Oh man.
I didn't know Akuma was in that at all.
Nobody does, but if you do that same thing, which you learn in that game, and you push up, there is a live action photo of what an Akuma would look like if he was,
But he's not
Van Damme.
a player.
No, I think he is. You can get Akuma in that game. It's the weirdest thing. His head is totally the wrong size. Like Andre the Giant size head to be this big guy, but he's in it. That's not 16-bit.
No, Street Fighter movie the game is.
Yeah, that came out.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So the big game that I loved and is probably my favorite fighter that I'm not sure if is 16-bit because I'm pretty sure it only was ported to PlayStation is the Darkstalkers series. I love that series.
Darkstalkers was awesome. Yeah, I think they kind of neglected it. They could have brought it to 16-bit systems.
I don't know
what
Morgan's been around in every Marvel vs. Capcom, so I don't know why they keep ignoring it.
I'm going to look this one up because.
But I loved Darkstalkers because it would show up in some arcades and I would be glued to it. It was interesting. It's the first time I remember huge sprites, like giant-looking sprites fighting regular-looking sprites. Just BB Hood.
Anacris was huge. BB Hood was very small on the screen.
But she had a machine gun.
Yeah.
That's when I remember just like big power moves. Like I really enjoyed seeing animations that occurred right before big moves.
There was no 16-bit. PlayStation was the earliest that came.
No,
home.
I think that totally counts though because it's a 2D game.
No. Let's talk about it. Certainly.
Yeah.
I just mean it wasn't on like SNES. I thought maybe it had been on SNES, but it's not.
But it was probably on the PlayStation and the early 32-bit stuff. But it was very much of that ilk. It was just larger sprites and it looked great. That game was beautiful. Like you could just sit there and watch the animation. You could tell that Capcom gave their artists free reign.
Yeah.
They're just like, hey, you guys are good at drawing stuff. Just draw crazy stuff.
Yeah, and they also adapted the style, like the more cartoony style, for Street Fighter Alpha series. Because Darkstalkers came first, and they were like, you know what, this looks really good. It's really high definition, like high fidelity sprites. Do this for the Street Fighter characters. I don't know where I got an accent from. And it just became like this awesome. I love the art style from the Darkstalkers and Alpha era.
It's fun to go back and play those games and just watch them.
It's also just nice to see someone take something you liked. Street Fighter 2 Turbo is probably the first time I saw a 2D fighter, probably. And just to continue increasing on the same thing without abandoning it for 3D or abandoning it for a new mode. It was just, let's make it faster, let's make it sharper, but let's not change the mechanics of what you like, so that if you play this game, it's the same as going back then. It just looks better, it feels better. You know, it's not abandoning the cause as many things do. But the truth is, it wasn't all good during this time. Like, I know we like to think it, but there is one massive blight, if not many, but I think there's one that Steve would want to talk about that involved not only creatures from another world, but certain recognizable creatures from this world.
Yeah, Terry's talking about Shaq Fu. A game that Shaq Shaquille O'Neal, sorry. Former NBA basketball player, current old man basketball commentator with giant gross feet.
Yes, huge, ugly feet.
We were talking about it earlier, actually, for whatever reason. Don't ask why Shaquille O'Neal came up. But
in an ice cream factory.
So he decided that he wanted to make a video game because he loved video games. Growing up, when he wasn't playing basketball, apparently. I didn't know that was a thing he didn't do 24/7 because he was in a movie about basketball. I thought that's
Blue Chips.
Yeah, but yeah, so he loved video games. So he wanted to make a video game. So he went to, I can't remember what developer it is. It was not Midway. It was a smaller developer.
I don't remember
But
either. It was not good.
I think, yeah, but they went and they made a game starring him in like this mystical, like Kunlun style, like mystical Chinese city where it just had all these different warriors from all over the world. They were all like fantastical, and he was just Shaq.
Like giant aliens
Yeah.
with spikes and stuff. Like, I'm Shaq.
He had moves like he would throw basketballs and they would catch fire. He would kick basketballs, they would catch fire. Lots of fire in basketballs.
Also a very memorable piece of box art where I think he's holding a flaming basketball, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember a ton about it specifically because I haven't played it, but I remember much of the lore around how bad it is.
But there were like green alien guys
I think
and stuff like that too.
I think there was like a mantis lady, maybe.
It was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird, but it did have a happy ending because just a few years ago they made a new Shaq Fu, and it has one of my favorite trailers I've seen in a long time because the trailer is real intense and acting like it's a big deal. And it's setting up for like the next great fighter, and then you hear Shaq say,
Shaq Daddy's gonna have to whoop some ass.
and then it starts and you see him
Somebody's about to get their ass whipped.
and it's one of the funniest intro, like it made my day. It made my day. I never played it. I don't think you're gonna want to play it, but it does exist. It was remade many years later.
It was like a Kickstarter, I believe.
Yeah.
Because people were like, I want money. Here's some money. Make some more Shaq Fu. Go for that.
Now for some more like better received ephemera. Unless this is a misfire of my memory, I'm pretty sure there was a Mega Man fighting game for the SNES.
Oh,
Like I know there's an arcade one, but didn't it come to home systems? Do you know, Chris?
I don't think it came to home systems, or at least it might have been on PlayStation. But there was Mega Man: The Power Battles, which it played a lot like a normal Mega Man game.
But then Power Battles 2 played a little bit more like a head-to-head fighting game, I think. But it still had the Mega Man aspects of you had weapons that did
Jump and shoot, man.
Yeah, you jump and shoot.
It was in the GameCube Mega Collection.
Okay, sorry, maybe that's what I was thinking.
Which
of.
also had
That was
Mega Man
not-
Soccer.
Yeah.
That was not a fighting game, but that was
No.
awesome.
You know
That
what I
was
liked
on
about the Power
SNES.
Battles?
Yes.
What was great about the Power Battles was it actually, actually there was a Mega Man fighter. But what was great about the Power Battles is it actually filled in some of the lore of the games because like it shows Zero at one point in that game. Like if Base wins, if you win the whole game as Base, the ending is Dr. Wily, and he has like these plans behind him that are the perfect outline of Zero, and he's talking about, well, he'll never be able to stop my next greatest creation. This will be the thing that they remember
cool.
me for.
That's really cool.
And I think it's the only game that has a little bit of crossover between those two.
For the most part, I think in like Mega Man X7 or something, they kind of verify that Zero was a creation of Wily.
Yes.
Either like 5 or like 6 or 7. They like actually in the game are like Wily created you. But up until then, it was very much like fan speculation, except for that. So I guess it wasn't fan speculation. They foreshadowed it
There was
in a little played game.
Yeah. There was a versus mode in Mega Man 7 where you could have a fist fight with Base. Now that I remember, so I would consider that to be a fighter. That could be wrong. Maybe there were guns and stuff.
Base's introduction was in 7, wasn't it? Like that.
Mega Man 7.
Yeah, which is one of the few I haven't played through. Did you like that game?
I did. I love Mega Man 7. It's a wonderful game. But it's different. It's not Mega Man X, and it's not classic Mega Man. It's a different control scheme, but it's cool. Like, the rush powers are really well put together. You can get Proto Man's shield in it, which is pretty cool. When it comes to Mega Man, I'm a big fan of just what are the power-ups. You know, I like when there's something hidden that's really, really cool, but you gotta get all the tanks or whatever to get it. But I like when there's something instead of nothing.
The Hadouken.
Yeah.
The Shoryuken in X2. I don't even know if they did anything in X3.
Yeah, you got Zero Saber.
Oh, wow.
That was the instant kill.
That's cool.
So, going back a little bit to Virtua Fighter,
Please.
it was on Sega Genesis. Virtua Fighter 2 came out in 1996 on Sega Genesis.
With no 32X.
No, Virtua Fighter 1 did not,
Wow.
which is very weird. So 2 came out on Genesis. The Virtua Fighter animated version came out for Master System in 97.
The Master System?
The Master System, the 8-bit system.
In 97?
And also the Game Gear, yes. So they made like a 2D sprite version so they can fit it on the older systems.
Oh, that must have been ugly as sin.
You know what? Speaking of ugly as sin, there was a beautiful as sin game that came out on Super Nintendo called Killer Instinct.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up next.
Please.
I don't know how I forgot about Killer Instinct.
Yeah, so at that time, it was kind of in the heat of the 16-bit wars, and Sega had its whole we're cool and edgy angle.
And Eternal Champions was their in-house proprietary 16-bit fighting game, which was garbage.
Guy had the visor.
Yeah, I love the main character though. He looked like Geordi from Star Trek Next Generation.
But yeah, at the time there was this whole like edgy versus nice and soft, and then Nintendo went to harden their image a little bit. So they were like, we can make a violent fighting game too. Let's go to Rare. We've worked with Rare a bunch on Donkey Kong Country, on lots of other games. So they made this game called Killer Instinct, and they used CG, just like Donkey Kong Country. They basically did 3D rendering and then digitized that to 2D sprites, so that they had a lot of frames of animation. They looked round, a little chunky, but they looked pretty cool compared to anything else back there.
Kilgore was my favorite.
Orchid was the best looking thing I'd ever seen in my life when I was a boy.
And you go back and look like, oh my god, what's wrong?
Yeah. Orchid, Jago, Cinder, Glacius, Fulgore, that's the one I was looking
Final, Riptor.
Was that Tor in this SNES? I thought he was only in 2.
He was in the,
okay.
yeah. It came out originally in the arcade, and they were like, this is a showcase of what the N64 can do.
Yeah, because in the arcade, wasn't it actual like 3D? Well, it was digitized, but it was much
The
better
background
digitized.
was 3D, and it was, back then it was the Ultra 64, and they put the logos on everything. It was Ultra 64 technology on all of it. And then it took, the N64 got delayed. It got delayed more than a year, and then they were like, all right, we have this great game. We ported it to the Super Nintendo in the meantime, and they ported it to the Super Nintendo. It's scaled down, still plays really well. It's
Very
a pretty
playable.
good game.
The music is all like industrial.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. I love the theme song so much.
They released. It was one of the first video game soundtracks to get released on
That's
CD.
right.
I remember because Chris loaned me the CD soundtrack, and I dubbed it onto a cassette and listened to it just like nonstop for like until the cassette broke.
It's called Killer Cuts. If you ever want to look it up, yeah, it's pretty fun.
Like Street Fighter, it also had a boxer character, TJ Combo.
TJ Combo was cool. The whole idea of the game, in terms of the gameplay, was combos. It was stringing apart together lots of small moves. So that
Killer Combo.
Yep.
Combo breaker.
Yep. Every level of combo, like if you got 5 hits or 6 hits, would have a different title. So it'd be
There's a general rule it's
Killer
very hard
Combo,
to break.
Ultra Combo, King Combo.
I was not good enough to do the combos, but if you could pull off a combo, especially in the arcade, God.
Yeah, Kilgore was the only character that I memorized.
Fulgore?
One combo. Fulgore. I memorized. He was a cyborg. Oh no, he's just a robot man. I don't even know if he's a cyborg. He was just a robot.
He's a robot.
I think.
Yeah.
But he has
With a
like
ponytail.
electric claws.
Yeah.
Oh god, he very much looked like a precursor to the bad guys from Halo.
Kind of.
A little bit.
Like they seemed like one of them with armor on, like full body armor, and it would be Fulgore.
Did you guys ever play Killer Instinct 2?
Yes.
Was that on the Super
N64,
Nintendo?
right?
It
Well,
was.
Killer Instinct Gold was on
was
N64.
They ported that. Now, it turned out that the arcade version of Killer Instinct was not actually running on anything like the Ultra 64 hardware. It was a proprietary arcade thing. So when they ported to the N64 later, it was a completely different game. It didn't do everything that arcade game did. So I know a lot of people. At the time I was like, wow, this is the future. Like playing the games that did that were Killer Instinct and Cruisin' USA. They were like, look at this is the future. This is going to be in your home in just a year. And you're like, I can't wait to play this at home. And it was not the same.
Turns out you could wait.
You could wait and wait and wait.
Yeah, I believe the N64 version Cruising. We're getting off topic. But it was like the backgrounds were like pasted on like sprites that
it was
cycled as opposed to like a 3D background.
But you know what? I do remember Nintendo full on decided Killer Instinct is going to be part of our marketing campaign. Like, we're going with this game as being a face of Nintendo. And then what happened?
Well,
Then Microsoft bought Rare, and it ended up on Microsoft and Windows.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny if you go back and play Donkey Kong Country games. I think Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. One of them has, if you go to Wrinkly Save Cave, there is a Killer Instinct arcade machine in the background.
Oh, nice.
And it's like, coming soon, Killer Instinct. It's awesome. Nintendo. Not Nintendo anymore. It's a Microsoft property now.
And Battletoads went with it. Yep. And I think that's awesome that it's in the new game and whatnot, but it's always going to make me sad.
I'll only be fine with it if they make a new Battletoads and it's really good and they release it for PC. Because Battletoads in Injustice are not. I mean, Killer Instinct are not.
Yeah, true. It's true. We need more of them. And it's a shame they didn't have a fighter or anything like that. They should have fought the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, that would be great.
I mean, the Ninja Turtles are in the Injustice series, so maybe they can have a crossover with Killer Instinct on Xbox.
People love. I mean, that's kind of the era of crossover games, right? Like there are a number of those, and they're really fun. Like people love to talk about who would beat who. I mean, obviously, like we've talked about Smash Brothers some in the past, but the Versus series started with X-Men versus Street Fighter. And now we have the Injustice series is kind of a crossover, isn't it?
They started adding a lot of other.
There was a
properties
Mortal
into it,
Kombat DC Universe crossover though before that.
Yeah, what was that called?
Mortal Kombat versus DC, I believe. It was very simple.
Yeah.
But it was basically you had a bunch of DC characters that had fatalities, although some weren't fatal ultimately. Like Superman's wasn't fatal, and the Joker's wasn't fatal, but in the best way possible, because he was like dizzy or something, pull out a gun, shoot you, and a flag would pop out and say bang, and then your character's like, "Ooh, you didn't kill me," and he pulls out another gun.
So, and I think those games are a direct answer to those 2D 16-bit games, because back then you'd play all the fighting games, you'd be like, who would beat who? And in the next generation, we got lots of that.
There was a DC fighting game for Genesis and probably Super Nintendo. I had a Genesis, so most of my games.
Oh, you talking about the death and return of Superman?
No, Justice League,
there was a Justice
the fighter
League,
game.
the fighting game for it. So I think they came out as maybe companion properties.
Real bad.
Because Death and Return of Superman was only on Super Nintendo.
Okay.
But so if Justice League wasn't on Super Nintendo, it was definitely on Genesis, but maybe they
And that was like a one-on-one brawler game?
Yeah.
Wow.
Had Green Arrow in it and Batman. And it did, for the first time, it did something that I'd never seen in a fighter. Superman could fly. There was a fly option so that you're in the air now, which wasn't very fun. I remember that was in, we didn't get them in America, but there were like Dragon Ball fighters that you could play on emulators.
I was going to bring that up next. There was a series of Super Nintendo Dragon Ball fighting games, and some of them were pretty fun.
We emulated a lot of them.
Yeah. Like, and it was like you hit a button and then you were flying, but it was just the same as fighting in the air. But it was a lot of like charging, and then you would go shoot key blasts at people.
But what was interesting about that was you could go on other sides of the screen and not see each other, and the screen would split.
Yes.
Which I'd never seen something like that before. I mean, it's a fun game. I mean, I recommend it.
Another 16-bit game that I just thought of, the Gundam Wing game. Which I think it was a side scroller technically, but a lot of the boss fights ended up being set up. Well, first of all, a lot of your moves were like fighting game style moves, like quarter circle forwards and charge moves. And then the boss fights, you got like health meters, I believe, and you just went one-on-one against the boss, which was another Gundam.
So that was fun?
It was good.
I did have fun with that game. I do remember playing that game, and it was kind of fun. But I'm a sucker for giant cannon moves. Like if there's a thing I can do on my controller to create some sort of giant animation move to start, where everyone's just like, crap! This is happening.
If there's a Buster something named move, or if there's a laser, I'm all over it.
One branch of these games that we haven't brought up yet, which barely counts, but counts, I think, is all the SNK fighters, all the Neo Geo fighters.
Oh God, yeah.
There's
There were lots of them.
so many of them.
Like World Heroes.
World Heroes was the first one I played.
Yeah, my friend's parents bought it for him instead of Street Fighter because it was cheaper, and it was cheaper because it was garbage. It was a garbage knockoff of Street Fighter.
But I had enjoyed World Heroes. I
Had Karnov in it from Bad Tooth.
Very specifically, I played that game after a funeral, I think. And we were all wearing suits, but there was, for some reason, a Neo Geo World Heroes game. And I just sat there. I played it over and over again. I think it was like 2 games per quarter or something. I didn't have much money, so it must have been very cheap.
Do you guys remember? It was a Neo Geo game. It had the samurai with the sword. It was called like
Samurai Showdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun. That was an honest to God decent fighter.
I think that might have also been ported to Super Nintendo at some point.
It definitely was, because I'm sure that's where I played it.
And King of Fighters is a series that's still going on today. We're on like King of Fighters 13 or something, some nonsense.
14, I think.
Yeah, 14.
Really?
Yeah, they just changed the 3D. It's the latest iteration, but up till then it was all sprite
It was
based.
all sprite-based, and like the latest sprite-based iterations are like the most eye-bleedingly like intense pixel art you've ever seen.
They never changed it. It's still pixel art.
Yeah. Up until 14.
Yeah, like the one that like it's just out now. But like they would reiterate and like redo the art like every couple games, and then it would have another compilation because it was like yearly. So they had the King of Fighters 7 at like 98 or 99, I think is when it started, and they would have like King of Fighters every couple years with small roster updates. But then every now and then they would redo the sprites. Everybody has new sprites.
The sprites, I mean, SNK is really good with art.
True. And they had their own crossover series later on. They had Capcom versus SNK.
And then you had SNK versus Capcom.
Yeah.
Which was, so one was developed by like Capcom and SNK in conjunction. The other one was developed by SNK with Capcom characters.
Right.
Okay.
And that one was the one that was not very good.
Do you remember a game called Brutal Rage? It was also an animal fighter, and I don't know if it's
I don't know Brutal Rage
also
unless you
Primal
have
Rage.
Is it one where you morph into animals in the middle of the fight?
No, but I know what that is too.
I remember Brutal Paws of Fury.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's where there was like a rabbit fighting a tiger.
Yeah, Brutal Paws of Fury.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it was? Oh, I thought it was Brutal Rage. Oh, okay. What is that game you're talking about though? Because I had
looked
one
it
on the
up-
GameCube.
I looked it up recently because I wanted to put it on Wallovision here at the shop, but it was it wasn't a 16-bit though. It was a 3D one. So it was a 3D like ring fighter.
Bloody Roar.
Bloody Roar.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you fight and you build up a meter.
Otherwise known as Beasterizer.
Beast. Yeah, in Japan it's called Beasterizer. Yeah, like each character has a beast form they turn into. Like one character, he turned into a tiger. So you would fight and you'd use his moves, like Tekken style moves, and then the meter fills up. And when you press a certain button combination, after the meter fills up, he just explodes in a thing of fountain of energy and he turns into a Tiger Man. And then he has different moves, and all his moves have roars and slashes and draw blood. And it was, I love playing it in the arcade. It was not a great game, but it was.
I'm pretty sure one of them was a lion and his hair was already a mane, so when he turned it like didn't really change, his face just changed. But he was fun to play as. Ganesha, the elephant, was in that game. I like that game, but we're getting off topic. That's 32-bit fighter, or 64.
And I think that was an era where there was a lot of weird, in the corner of the arcade, weird named games like Beasterizer, Ergies, Tobal number 1.
Yeah, so which one of those was the Final Fantasy spinoff?
Ergies.
Was Ergies? Okay.
Like, who would go, and the game would say it out loud, like an announcer would go, Ergies. That does not sound cool. Nothing about that sounds cool.
But it was Final Fantasy. Isn't that cool?
You know,
enough?
I think
In this instance, no. Even though Tifa was in it.
It was Toshinden. That was definitely PlayStation era.
Yeah,
that was one of the launch titles.
A launch title for PlayStation 1. So that's everything changed when polygons happened.
Yeah. Although, do they still make any games that are? Well, we mentioned the one. We mentioned King of Fighters.
Yeah, they make that one. They still make. I mean, Street Fighter still plays the same, but it's in 3D. In terms of 2D games, though, there's an indie game called Skullgirls that is beautifully hand done animation and art, and it plays like a classic Street Fighter plus combos with crossover tag attacks if you want. It's really good.
And yeah, there's like in that like Skullgirls kind of like brought in its wake a lot of like indie 2D games, fighting games. A lot of them come out on Steam now, so they're clearly not 16-bit, but they all have really weird names, like you were saying. Like one's called Birth Undernight.exe. And I still can't wrap my head around that title.
Why?
It's like birth:_undernight.exe. So it's like, are they living in some kind of simulated reality called Under Night and they're birthed into it? No, they're just a bunch of anime people that kick things really hard and have swords.
There was another game that came out somewhat recently that tried to distill all of that 16-bit fighting into one very simple formula called Divekick. And there were 2 buttons in the game, no joystick. Just 2 buttons, dive and kick. Good. And the only thing, dive would make you jump, and if you pressed it again, you would dive, and there's kick, and that was all. But there are fighting game tournaments based around this game because they tried to mix it up such that the essentials of a fighting game is controlling space and reading your opponent, and they tried to distill that into these 2 buttons, and they were pretty successful at it.
Yeah, the one-hit kills. So whoever has the high ground wins.
Yeah.
A la episode 3.
Yeah, I have the high ground, Anakin. So if you ever have a minute, try dive kick out, especially against another person, because it seems really simple, but it's one of those things where mind games come into play.
Or you can watch a video of it, which my brother did when I told him about it. At like 3 o'clock in the morning, he's watching videos about dive kick, and I was like, "What are you doing? Go to sleep." Why did I tell you about
It's
this?
definitely a game that could have existed on the Super Nintendo, like the NES. It could have existed on.
Let's talk about that real quick. What is a game that you wish came out as a 16-bit fighter that maybe they could still do that never came out? If you could have one.
That's a good question.
I would love if they did like a Naruto game on 16-bit, because the ones out now are all arena-based. You run around and press buttons and throw items that never hit the enemy, and then you just do a cutscene and win or lose. I would like when we just, like the Dragon Ball Z style games where you're head-to-head and you just go at it, and there's no fancy running around in arena. There's no cutscene moves. You just have to be quicker than the other person.
It'd be awesome to see the Naruto characters in hand-drawn 16-bit
Like
style, like
pixel style.
because all the characters in that show are so
distinct.
unique and
Yeah, like
distinct.
well-designed,
Like unlike Dragon Ball, where a lot of them are just like shiny dudes with gold hair.
You know, you tell Goku and Gohan apart when they're adults because Gohan has short hair.
Yep. But in Naruto, they're all very different colors, very different shapes, very different fighting styles. That would be cool. A crossover Dragon Ball Naruto game.
Why has that not been? Well, they've done crossover Smash Brothers styles games.
So you just brought up what I want. I would love a 16-bit Smash Bros.
Oh yeah.
Like, who were the big hitters during the Super Nintendo time? Let's make that.
Like if they did that one-on-one, they could definitely do it like technology-wise. One-on-one might be kind of hard. But if you did just one-on-one in the arena,
that same
that might
idea
work out,
where Kirby could fight Luigi, but in
Fighting full gore.
Yeah, exactly, because it's Super Nintendo. But I mean, certainly I drew that a million times as a kid. Like I drew that. I wanted to see that Mario fighting Scorpion. Actually, I think someone sent in a postcard to Nintendo Power that showed Mario facing off against Scorpion.
someone, huh? I wonder who that would be.
Was it you?
I thought you were saying you did it.
No, that
I thought you were just being coy. Like, I've heard someone say that, and that sounds amazing.
No, I saw it, and it blew my mind. Because it's like a flaming skull fighting like Mario. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would have killed for. What about you?
What you were just talking about sounded awesome. I mean, really, the holy grail of all these crossovers, I think, still is like a Dragon Ball pulled into other stuff. Like, I would love to have Goku versus Ryu. Like, that would be fun. But yeah, I think it's just totally different universes of licensing.
Yeah, Bando, whatever they're called,
Bandai?
Bandai and NAMCO at some point merged, and they just became a super conglomerate of all anime game things.
We got sort of a weird
So they
taste
own
of
all of
that
it.
when they made Tatsunoko.
Capcom versus Tatsunoko.
Capcom versus Tatsunoko was a lot of Japanese properties that I was not familiar with.
Like G-Force and
it was.
so I really remember Mazinger Z, like all like the mech stuff and the fighting team stuff that did not come over here.
It never came to America, so I didn't know any of the characters, but it was cool and they looked cool. And I went to
G-Force came over here. It was called something else in Japan. They called it G-Force here, but they were like the people with like the bird costumes. They had wing capes.
Yeah.
And their helmets had beaks on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a game made about that, and it was a 2D crossover fighter, and it was awesome. And I'd love if that was Dragon Ball Street Fighter. Like, that'd be fun.
Get on it, Capcom and NAMCO.
I'll tell you what, we'll talk about this and then we'll wrap up. They did do it. Not them, but computer programmers
Mugen.
brought Mugen into the world, and I love that thing.
I never played much with it.
It destroyed one of my computers at home. Sorry, Mom and Dad, but that's why that one computer just stopped working, because I tried to put a bunch of those Mugen games on it. To the point where I keep trying to find a Windows 95 computer to play some of it on.
I'm pretty sure they.
I can hook you up. We can make it work.
I would love
You
that.
can play it post Windows 95. It might not work on Windows 10. Maybe you have to do a lot of legacy mode
Something
stuff.
changed
I'm sure
that
I can
wasn't
make it
able to
work.
do.
Yeah,
But I remember in that game, it did the thing I always wanted. You could play Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and you could shoot at Kamehameha, and it took up the whole screen. That's all I've ever
and you
wanted.
can shoot it at
Unavoidable
Superman.
Giant screen.
He used a Superman spray, I believe, from the Justice League game from
Did it
Genesis. Yeah, where he was it? No, it was a custom sprite made in the style of the Marvel versus Capcom.
It's so cool.
So it was like I forget. You know Dimitri from Darkstalkers.
Yes.
The vampire. They took his sprite and repainted him as Superman. I remember because Dimitri's because Dimitri's idle animation was he would just breathe in deep and stick his chest out and pull his arms like that and then go back down.
Yeah.
So they gave Superman did the exact same thing. He would just go like this. No, he would just keep doing this when he's about to fight. And it was like that does not look natural on Superman. I was like, but Dimitri, he did that. Yeah, so they took other sprites and
Doctor.
doctor
I
them
need it.
into the sprites you needed, so they would follow the gameplay mechanics of whatever character they were based on. So it worked out for most of the time. Like Goku was based on Ryu or Ken. Mm-hmm. So they took the Shinku Hadouken animation, just made it even bigger, and so it works easy. It's very modular.
You must have loved Cyclops in the Versus games. You'd be like,
Yes.
Optic Blast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cable.
And Morrigan, even her final beam was pretty much like
Iron Man.
Iron Man.
Proton Cannon. Which was way too easy a move to execute.
His repulsive blast was way underpowered in that game. I'm still mad about that.
I mean, I'm a big fan of.
Hyper Viper beam.
If we're gonna start doing it, but see, I wouldn't classify that as 16-bit. I think that was
It's
the
a
next
touch
level.
above, yeah. But still 2D. It was like fancy 2D.
It's definitely my favorite kind of fighter. Is simple background, no sidestepping. It's just going at each other side to side. It's still my favorite way to play. I mean, if I can recommend any sort of fighter, though, if you want the original, I mean, it's probably, I think Street Fighter Alpha 2 might be the most technical of those to come out on a Super Nintendo. And I think if you're into it for technical, where it's all I want to do is push 19 buttons and get a kill move out of it, that's what I would recommend you go to. What about you guys?
Alpha 2 had combos, it had super combos. You could link into the super combo finishing moves at the end. Yeah, that's probably the most complete one you're going to get.
I think it is, yeah.
If you're going to play a game, a 16-bit fighting game that's just balls to the wall, ridiculous, and also has a lot of that 90s charm to it, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Tournament Fighter is where you want to go. Technically, it's not very good, or maybe I wasn't very good at it. I haven't played it in a while, so I don't know. But I remember the moves being not hard to pull off, but hard to connect with the enemy. Mm-hmm. The hitboxes were all very wonky, but that didn't stop me from trying to pull off all sorts of moves. I think Leonardo has some kind of dive move, kind of like the Hulk in the Marvel games, where you dove forward, or like Wolverine.
Yeah.
He dove forward with his katana and slashed him and made
Oh, I remember it. I couldn't do it. I never pulled it off. Saw it once.
It was down, quarter, down, right, quarter up, back, punch, or something like that. It was worse than SNK controls.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just fun to look at all those characters that were totally 90s. And especially if you grew up loving the Ninja Turtles we did, it brings back memories. But if you don't, just look at the character designs and you would know exactly what year that was made. It was sometime after Todd McFarlane took over Spider-Man.
Deep cut.
Yeah. I would say don't play the game, but look up videos of what we mentioned before, Street Fighter the movie, the game. Because it's hilarious. The way it looks, the way it plays, just watching it is enough to get a chuckle, because this was the ultimate in just absurdity.
Also, don't watch the movie.
No,
Please don't watch the movie.
The movie is fun. The movie is fun to
Oh
watch.
God.
But just seeing those digitized faces, poorly done, and they took a game and made it worse. You took a great game and just made it worse. It's amazing.
We need a Mortal Kombat this series, the game.
Yes.
That would be amazing. Michael Jai White just comes with his jacks.
Yeah, actually, a fun thing at the end would be to try to remember all of the iterations, the absurd Street Fighter titles.
Okay.
We had Street Fighter, Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 3000, which was an unofficial side-scrolling spin-off on the
Yeah,
NES.
official only.
No, it was unofficial in that it was based on another game in Japan, and they reskinned it for America.
And they
so they
screwed
made
up,
the main
right?
character Ken Masters.
It was Ken?
Yeah, the main
they
character
made
was
it
Ken
Ken.
Masters, but it took place 1,000 years in the future.
But then Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yep. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
What did you say, Championship Edition?
We did
first?
not say championship.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2,
The
Super
new
Street
fighters?
Fighter,
Yeah, the new
yeah,
challenge.
new challenge.
Subtitle.
Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Street Fighter 2 Alpha. Street Fighter 2 Alpha.
No. It was Street Fighter Alpha.
Street Fighter Alpha
2.
Street Fighter Alpha 3, Street Fighter EX,
Street Fighter
Street Fighter
3.
EX2. Those were on the PlayStation.
That's when you're
Those are the 3D
sidestepping.
ones.
Yeah.
No, they were fighting games, but they were 3D.
Yep.
And they were not very good.
Blanca looked like nothing. Blanca looked like the Blob from Clay Fighter.
But there's a character named Skullomania, who is
Yes.
just a guy in a Halloween-style skeleton suit.
There had to be more Street Fighter, like when
Street
they
Fighter
port the
3.
games.
The Street Fighter. Wait, go ahead.
No, you keep going. Yes.
There was
Go
like
back
a
to
Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition throwback something.
But it was one Street Fighter Edition Championship. Street Fighter 2 Championship
I think HD is what.
Tournament
they had to do.
Edition, comma.
Tournament Edition.
That came out for a Super Nintendo. I don't think it came out for anything else.
Then there's Street Fighter 3 Second Strike, Street Fighter 3
Third
Third
Strike.
Strike. Like, so people make fun of the way Capcom names these games, and they're right. They're very right.
But each game had a gameplay innovation or iteration that set it apart from the previous one. And at least back then, you couldn't sell DLC or an add-on to add that stuff. Now you can, and they continue with it anyway because they're jerks and they're greedy. But back
And
then,
now they're releasing games that have no arcade mode, just versus.
And then they re-release them as Arcade Edition. Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition. Yeah.
Thank you for everything you've given us, Capcom, but come on, get it together on your releases.
yeah, meanwhile, the timeline, if you want to try
Oh,
to get
don't
the timeline-
even start that. That's worse than the Zelda timeline.
I could try quickly with overarching series because there's way too many, but it's like Street Fighter, then Street Fighter Alpha, then Street Fighter Alpha 4.
What?
I mean, the Street Fighter 4.
4.
Then Street Fighter 2, and then Street Fighter 5, and then Street Fighter 3 is at the end.
So Street Fighter 3 is the most future.
Yeah,
push
it's the most, it's furthest in the future. So 4 I think is after 2. So it's Street Fighter Alpha, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5.
Wherever
Street Fighter
Sakura
3.
shows up. As soon as they started making the Ryu spin-offs where their fireballs sucked, I was like, what? You're worthless.
Like
You're
Sean,
like-
his fireball, was he kicked a basketball at you or a soccer ball or something? Like 2 inches?
Dan's super move went 1 inch in front of his face.
Well, Dan was actually a parody of the
was a
SNK
joke.
fighters. Where their fireballs went 1 inch in front of their face.
But so did Sakura's and a bunch of other people. But hey, this was a fun time.
Well, Sakura's had too much, it was unfocused power. So they were big fireballs, but they burned out
Do
quickly.
you remember I was torn when Chun-Li got fireballs. I was like, Kiko can. That's not her thing.
She always had fireballs. We just didn't know how to do them in Street Fighter 2 or Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition. Or not until Turbo.
I remember the way she looked when she did it.
Yeah.
Very sexual.
Butt out, head down. Yeah. Wow.
God bless you, Japan. Well, I think that wraps it up for this week's Tubby Talk. Thank you so much for watching and talking gaming. We want to know your games. What do we miss? Go back, play Clay Fighter. Let me know what you think.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, come hang out at these guys' shop and eat some delicious ice cream and talk to the boys.
Totally.
Let us know what you think about Primal Rage.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Primal Rage?
Should it be here? Should it be on WandaVision?
It will never be here. It's too gross. It should be, but we're a family-friendly establishment. Although kids would probably love seeing a monkey fart into a dinosaur's face.
Good night, everybody.
Hadouken!
Good night, everybody.